Right. Well, just as soon almost as we got into worship, God just flashed a whole bunch of the different women in the Bible in my mind. And, it was easy to see, I would say, the lady that, I can't remember her name now, the one that drove the stake through the head. Yeah, she was probably a D personality, I'm guessing. Mm-hmm. And, and I think, though, he said that sometimes the women that think they're just mothers, that they're the S personalities, that they're not quite, that they don't stand out to God, that they're just support for God. But then he said, what do you think Mary was? Mary was probably an S personality, and David also. Joseph also, because they were the support system for Jesus to raise him and do that training. And he also said, with Ruth and Naomi, that Ruth loved her mother-in-law so much that she left her people and went with her for the love of family.
Yeah.
And then, through that, she did what Naomi had said to do and became redeemed by the kinsman and redeemer, Boaz. He said she was probably an S personality because of that extreme love of family.
Yeah.
And then Esther came up, and he said that was not Esther's idea to go before the king. Mordecai said you have to.
Right.
But I think because of her gentle personality, maybe loving personality, that was why the king was accepting her to do something that normally was against the rules.
Right.
If she would have been like, you're doing it my way or no way type person, he would have said, out of here. And through Esther, then her people were saved. It was for the love of her people, her family, and the people. So, I felt like the message for that was just because you think that maybe you have an insignificant role, and part of that is just society tells us that.
Yeah.
That it is not insignificant to God, and that at times he will take that person and put them in a pivotal key role, and we don't know when that's going to be, because you don't hear anything else about Esther. Once she saved the whole kingdom and the whole everything else, you don't hear anything about her. And Leah, she had the 12, and that was the basis, of the lineage. And so we don't think about sometimes that is really a strong trait, is just that extreme love. So I thought he said, sometimes people stand out, but that's not necessarily only people I can use. And I think since it was mothers, because I think there's a lot of mothers out there that think, I'm just a mother, I only stay home, and he's saying, that's really important. So.
And then Esther, being that S, I never thought about it that way. It took tremendous courage.
Exactly.
But also wisdom.
Right.
Like if she was another personality, she might have just blustered in there and run the whole thing, but she was perfect for that task.
And Mary had to have extreme courage.
Yeah.
You were a teenage mother in that day and time when you could be stoned.
Yeah.
And her only question was, how's this all going to happen?
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was going to happen or no, please don't pick me. It was just, how's that possible? So there was a lot of courage in those SP personalities. So I think if you've got an S personality, that you're family oriented, and that's your very strong thing. Don't feel like you don't have a starring role. I'll put it that way. That you're not always in the support cast. It's always that you can be the star of the show.
That's a good word.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
I would add just a little bit to that, because I was thinking of JL as well, and through her, I'll let you switch this around, Mike, however you need to. But in her role, she was at home and offered hospitality. You know what I mean? What? Oh. You didn't want to be on camera?
No.
Let's just keep it like this. And I don't know how to switch it, so we'll just keep it facing this way. I don't know where my little button went. But, she had the courage, like we talked about one time, where she literally a stake in his head. You know what I mean?
It takes a lot of oomph.
Yes. Yes, it does. And I was reading in this book this morning, and it's interesting. It's Women, God's Secret Weapon by Ed Silvoso. And when he first said it at the beginning of the book about the serpent and the woman, the seed of the woman, and that the seed would crush Satan's head, and it would bruise, he would bruise his head, crush his head and bruise the heel of the seed. He said there's going to be an end time play out of that again. And I was like, well, that's already been done. He already, crushed his head and blah, blah. But then he starts talking about the rematch.
Yeah.
And he says that in Psalm 68, so if women want to read their role in the end of the age battle, it is in Psalm 68. And he believes it will happen in the 1040 window, probably in the Middle East, where women are very much suppressed and oppressed, and that they'll rise up. But I read it last week where it says in a Passion, can you read it? Psalm 68, and I think it's verse 11 and 12.
God Almighty declares the word of the gospel with power, and the warring women of Zion deliver its message. The conquering legions have themselves been conquered. Look at them flee. Now Zion's women are left to gather the spoils.
Women led that charge. And it's the mighty women of Zion, the warrior women of Zion. And so it's talking about, if you read all of that psalm, and I never saw this, it's talking about the end of the age battle before the return of the Lord and the key role that women will play.
There is, at the first of the year, and I cannot remember right offhand, but it was somebody fairly well known to the prophecy, like Chuck Pierce or Dutch Sheets or, I don't think it was either one of those, but it possibly could have been. But talked about with the women and the role they play in
the end of the age.
Yeah,
And
stronger role.
He said they'll be like hidden. He mentions how they'll be like doves that are in sheepfolds, because sheepskins turn gray as they're being used, for seats and beds back then and flooring, and that will be silver-colored doves placed on gray sheepfolds that will be inconspicuous. But then he says the gold rings of their pinions do not attract attention. That is in verse 13. Can you read that one?
When you sleep between sharpened stakes, I see you sparkling like silver and glistening like gold, covered by the beautiful wings of a dove.
And
14. When the Almighty found a king for himself, it became white.
There's something about their pinions are glistening gold or treasure. And so that was kind of interesting. They were like sharpened stakes under the wings that couldn't be seen, like a secret weapon. And that was in, I think, maybe the New King James. I'm not sure.
And that was Psalm 60, what?
68.
68.
And so it's going to be a surprise attack on the enemy. He's not going to expect women. And then he also mentioned in here a city called Zalman. And that's in verse 14. And it talks about snowing in Zalman. Well, he said that Zalman was very significant because Abimelech, the son of Gideon, through one of his concubines, made Zalman infamous. This evil character conspired with the inhabitants of Shechem, his hometown, which Shechem was a very violent group of people. They were horrible as far as violence, against his deceased father's 70 legitimate sons, and he killed them in order to rule. And then a dispute arose between him and the people of Shechem. So Abimelech besieged it. He defeated its army and he murdered them. And the way he did it is 1,000 men and women fled to a fortified tower. And Abimelech climbed Mount Zalman to show his army how to cut branches from the trees. And once they had enough firewood, they transported it to the lower chamber of the tower. They set it on fire and they burned alive 1,000 men and women. and that's in Judges chapter 9:49. So then Abimelech went to Thebes, a nearby town. He captured it as well. So the people took refuge in another tower, and he decided to burn them down or burn them alive too. But as he approached the tower, a woman threw a millstone, and it landed on his head, crushing his skull. That's verse 53. And so as he lay, obviously dying, he was more distressed by the fact that a woman had brought him down than he was concerned with his impending death. So he had his armor bearer kill him. Muslims believe if they get killed by a woman, they will not be in paradise.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So anyway, it was just a neat thing, and I would see how probably both of those women, JL and this lady here, that they probably weren't, the D, let's go type personality. They were just in the right place, and they're the ones that stepped up to the plate, had the courage, and they brought victory to their people. Because we think of Deborah, who probably was a D. We think of some of those women as, that type of personality and aggressive, when God used a lot that were S's. The majority of them were.
I think an S could turn into a D.
Oh, the S can be a D if you mess with their family. Yes. But anyway, okay. So with that prophetic word, I want to restart this and get into our teaching from Galatians today. But do you guys have anything else to add? Oh no. Okay. Well.
Is it a possibility?
Just better hold it.
That's what I would say.
Well, I guess you could, and then just
Have
get
fun.
water and.
Oh, done it?
What? I'm not going in there. Nope. But awesome.
Okay. There we go. Dang it.
Is the current coffee thing empty? You can't do that.
Hey, Mike, can you stop that and restart it? And I'm going to let us